if I wanted to win an election as a Republican, all I would have to do is to talk about the nuke-eular family. And every educated person would say, you mean nuclear, not nuclear. And then they'd lose. My belief is that if you are an anti-Trumper, I am an anti-Trumper. That is, I am against Trump.
Right.
But mere mention of his name doesn't send me into paroxysms.
Right.
I'm not apoplectic with rage when he said something that's been carefully constructed to set everybody off who carries a certain behavior pattern. Yes. Right. And so what my belief is that I'm going through a very private, weird little mini hell in which I intellectually can't stand the guy, but I understand him very well.
Yes.
I understand why it works. I predicted this in some weird way. I wrote an essay on kayfabe. I don't know if you've...
I do, yes. Yeah, that you were one of the people who actually suggested he could win. Was that you?
Yep. Well, I just had Timur Kuran on the program for preference falsification. I thought everyone was lying about their feelings about Trump.
When they were asked about it publicly.
Well, because you needed to say how horrible he was if you were part of the institutional milieu, or if you needed to keep a job and make sure that you weren't on the wrong side of your clients. And what I find very frustrating, I mean, you have to appreciate, the mainstream has no positive interest in this show, me, or anything that my group is doing whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not just, I mean, it's the fact that we have this very negative view of CNN and NPR, not what they're supposedly standing for.
Right.
Right. So in this narrative, I guess what my take on it is that the dominant, I don't even know how to say it, idealism of a time is usually a false narrative that's hiding how people can make money during that period of time.
Right.
So We Are the World
right.
is a portrayal of concern about Africa, the poor in Asia, what can we do to uplift people. But really, it was a story about if we don't break our bonds to our fellow countrymen, if we don't make sure that we can not have to take care of Appalachia and the poor in the South and the downtrodden in our inner cities, we're not going to be able to make money. The way to make money is to move operations overseas, to keep your country with its headquarters wherever it's tax advantaged. There was some process by which globalization was the betrayal of your countrymen.
Right.
And that thing was portrayed as the Davos idealism.
Yeah.
And the Davos idealism is cratering because it was a wealth transfer program posing as a philanthropic effort.
Right.
And so the reason that nobody wants the Clintons, nobody wants the Democratic Party, nobody wants the sanctimonious nonsense about our thirst for justice and our hatred of oppression is that this is a search for a constituency that's large enough to get people elected who can continue to keep people making money who've been figuring out how to make money.
Right.
And Trump, the reason I'm anti-Trump is that he's taking lots of ideas that are actually originally wholesome, and he's giving them this shitty kind of mean-spirited, nasty spin. Like, for example, there's nothing wrong with restrictionism whatsoever. There's nothing xenophobic about restrictionism.
Right.
The desire to want to keep a border is not a xenophobic urge.
I completely agree.
Okay. So when he tinges it with hints, he's playing around with something. He knows what the inference patterns of the left are. So he'll say something and the left will say, oh my God, you're really saying that, you think all Mexicans are rapists. And then the right.
Whose fault is that?
Pardon me?
I mean, whose fault is that? I mean, that's the left's fault for taking the bait or overreacting.
No, it's not that. They figured out a means of keeping people in line. Mm-hmm. Whereas as you start to explore something that will stop the money-making, the transfer of wealth from whoever, it's like forced transfusion.
Right.
The institutional left, I believe, figures out how to transfuse one group to supply blood to another. And what the left is supposed to be is something, more wholesome and more decent. As you start to question the transfusion, you start to get this question like, surely you're not suggesting that we should close our borders to the downtrodden.
That's right.
And Trump is saying, yeah, I'm not scared. You're not going to back me off by just saying that. Surely you weren't saying, that's a menacing tone. And for that, many people love him because do you remember the scene in Reservoir Dogs of Tarantino where you've got, I guess, is it Steve Buscemi and I can't remember the other actor, where they're trying to figure out who the rat is, and Mr. Blonde comes in, and Mr. Blonde is the psychopath who shot up the jewelry store, and they can't figure out who they can trust. The only person you can trust is the psychopath because the psychopath isn't under control. Right. Well, Trump came through as Mr. Blonde. And the one person we know isn't under institutional control is Donald Trump because he would never say those things. Yeah. Okay, so now we've got a new paradigm where the only trustworthy person is the least trustworthy person. Which I've been trying to map this out, and the problem with it is you can't wake people up because they're dying to get back to the process of making money by betraying their fellow countrymen. The globalization thing came to an end. There's no new idea about how to make money.
Right.
And the pyramid schemes are collapsing.
Right. So what's going to happen?
Well, that's why you're on the portal, sir.
Well, look, getting back to what you said in terms of, I forgot the name of the book. It was about preference versus
private truths, public lies.
Right. I knew a lot of these people. I wrote about them in White. I write a section of the book is about the mood in Los Angeles in the months leading up to the primaries and then to the election and then after the election. And it is a cast of my usual entitled characters, even though this is a work of nonfiction. And many of these conversations play out in the Polo Lounge or at Spago like they do in my LA novels, with irate rich people who cannot believe that things did not go their way, which is also something that's in Lesson Zero in Imperial Bedrooms. So even though White is a nonfiction chronicle of whatever, a certain kind of the arc of a Gen Xer, I see it. It starts out in the late 60s, early 70s with me as a child, and then I'm standing, with my dick in my hand in the summer of 2018 going, I can't say this. I can't express myself this. Where's freedom of speech? It seems to be, and I'm much more upset about it than my millennial boyfriend who's used to rules. He's used to all the rules that have been.
This is maddening. I can't live like this.
I know I can't live like this either. But anyways, so I knew these people in Los Angeles. I knew the Obama Trump voter. I knew many of them who were making that jump. So, and I just sensed something different by looking at everything than my millennial boyfriend did, who was already, printing out his Hillary T-shirts and, couldn't wait for
he had Hillary T-shirts.
No, he's a Bernie
metaphor.
guy.
Okay.
He was a Bernie guy, Bernie Sanders guy, and he held his nose voting for Clinton, but anything but Trump because Trump drove him insane, and there was just no fucking way that Trump could be elected president. So that was all going to be good. But so I did know, and I write about this in White. People said, "Don't tell anybody I'm going to vote for Trump. Don't tell anybody I'm voting for Trump." And so I wasn't completely surprised when Trump won. But what surprised me, and this ties into what you were first asking, what completely surprised me for the next 2 years leading up to now is how so many of my smart friends became infected by Trump. Look, the most...
No, say more of what you mean by that.
No, well, look, all of our narratives, we have been forced to deal with Trump. I talked about this in an interview that I gave for the Washington Post, where even if you don't want Trump in your life, he's in your life, and you have to have an opinion about him because everyone else is talking about him. either people loathe him to such a degree that you are sucked into the conversation. And I believe it's the same with people who love him. And I know what was that huge exhale? What was that about?
Okay. Wait. I'm with you. I'm with you. I want to write an ELIZA program. I swear I could write a small program that generates his tweets. Like, for example, before Trump, I had a simple idea, which is that if I wanted to win an election as a Republican, all I would have to do is to talk about the nuke-eular family. And every educated person would say, you mean nuclear, not nuclear. Mm-hmm. And then they'd lose. It was like an automated reaction, that there was a class thing that says, correct anyone who says nuclear. Okay, well, that's a pretty simple program. Yes, you win the correct pronunciation of the word nuclear, and you lose an election because you're a dick, right? So Trump is going to hit this thing over and over again. The left is programmed to say certain things, to defend certain things. And, if you have to make the point that there is absolutely zero connection whatsoever between Islam and terror, there is no connection whatsoever. Zero. It's an illusion. Okay. Somebody can hit that, all day long, every day. When I remember reading an issue of Dabiq put out by ISIS, where their point was, I think it was called, they had an article called Why We Hate You, Why We Fight You. And they said, you've marginalized all the people in your society who point out that there is an aspect of fundamentalist jihadi Islam that just hates you because you don't believe in Allah the way we do. And because that couldn't be said.
Why couldn't that be said? That's what the break I have as a Gen Xer.
I'll say it. There was, once upon a time, a heuristic that said the best way to have a multicultural society is that you have to have some load-bearing fictions, like all religions are equally problematic in all ways. There's no way that's true. Jains are not equally problematic as Jews. Jews are more problematic than Jains, and I'm able to say that because I'm Jewish.
Of course.
Okay. As a result, those heuristics hardened into dogmas because they were necessary to keep our society operating. We have to believe at the moment that a jury of 12 people knows how to convict somebody based on guilt, even though the DNA evidence shows that that's not a real rubric. Okay, well, it's a heuristic. Maybe it works some of the time.
Right.
Okay, so as these sort of heuristics have been breaking down, and these heuristics of the left are on top of the ones that are necessary for civil society, the desire to maintain this complex of ideas, like trade is always good. No, trade is not always good for all people. It's beyond moronic, right? But it's only recently that you have economists like Brad DeLong saying, actually, it's what you're optimizing is a social Darwinist function, which trade is good for you based on the cube of your wealth. So the richer you are, by the cube of your wealth, trade is good for you.
Right.
Well, Brad DeLong was also saying, and why is everybody complaining about the trade deals we inked since they helped people in Mexico? As if American voters are going to vote to help Mexican peasants. It's great if Mexican peasants are helped, but I just don't see the lowest echelons of American society having as their top priority helping Mexicans with their vote. None of this makes any effing sense.
But then why aren't they deprogramming themselves?
Because
it's not going to move them forward, say, in the new world order. And that's the problem with Trump. Trump presented something extremely new into the conversation, and the left couldn't deal with it. The media couldn't deal with it. I always felt that if they had kind of dealt with him in a neutral way and just reported what he did without all this hyperbole, I don't know if he would have won necessarily.
Because all of the smart, honest people had to be ejected from the institutional layer.
Terrifying. But
well,
I know
but
what you're
no,
saying.
no. What I'm talking about is
you're
universal expulsion of people who will not go along with the gated institutional. My theory about this, if you haven't met it, is that we grew very quickly in a very stable way that was totally anomalous post World War II to about 1972. And every single institution that you see has an expectation of that kind of growth continuing. And so what happened is that all of those institutions, when they went pathological, they became Ponzi schemes, and you needed to have a group of people in that institution who would not reveal the Ponzi scheme. And so effectively, our expert class has been selected for as the people who will not blow the whistle on the fact that they're lying.
Right.
Right. And so you can get this at Harvard or you can get this at Stanford. Maybe the University of Chicago is something of an exception.
Hollywood.
Well, Hollywood is right. Exactly.
Silicon Valley.
And so all of these institutional things are suffering from the embedded growth obligation disease, or ego, right? And so these egos have turned, like, the institutions are not interested in hearing how to beat Trump because it's easy. It's easy to beat Trump.
It is.
But the only problem is that if you beat Trump in the way that's easy to beat Trump, you will not service the people with second and third homes in the Hamptons.
Right.
Right. And so those people are saying, well, I wasn't thinking of spending that much to beat Trump. Right. No, that's really, that's what the issue is that right now, the exciting part is I want to retake the institutions. Do you really want 9 conservative Supreme Court justices? If you do, if that's what excites you,
No.
I highly recommend talking about reparations for slavery. Why don't you tell some sort of a child Holocaust survivor that they need to pay reparations for slavery? See how that goes.
Oh,
I mean, this is insane. We've gotten to some, it
is insane.
And I'm used to self-hating Jews. We've had that as an issue forever.
Right.
The self-hating American. Oh man, just suck it up, man. Okay, so you were born with white skin. Do you want? It's like watching people. It's like watching a teenage girl in a Cutting episode. You're not responsible for every bad thing that this country has ever done. We're not going to right all wrongs. It would be absolutely unjust to go after every past injustice. And like, are we going to get rid of the Arch of Titus in Rome because the Romans sacked Jerusalem and it commemorates? You can see they're carrying off like this giant menorah. They stole our stuff, man. All right. Let's tear down the Arch of Titus. Let's burn the Merchant of Venice. How deep do we want to go with this madness? We're nuts.